Welcome back to True Stories, where we share incredible moments that remind us of the power of kindness and courage. Before we begin, comment where you're watching from today, and let's dive into a story that proves sometimes heroes appear exactly when we need them most. Ryan Matthews stood alone in the empty school gym, his breath creating small clouds in the cold morning air. At 16, he was already familiar with the weight of silence, the kind that falls heavy before the storm. The sun hadn't yet risen, but he was already at his morning training session, just like every other day for the past 2 years. His muscles ached from yesterday's punishment drills, but he didn't dare skip today's session. Coach Barrett wouldn't tolerate any excuses. The young athlete had once loved wrestling more than anything. The sport had been his escape, his chance to prove himself, to maybe even earn a college scholarship and make his single mom proud. But lately, that dream had turned into a nightmare. The bruises on his arms weren't all from legitimate wrestling moves, and the constant weight cuts were becoming more extreme. Still, he kept quiet, kept pushing, kept trying to be what Coach Barrett demanded. What made it worse was that nobody seemed to notice, or if they did, they didn't say anything. Coach Barrett had brought 3 state championships to Riverside High in the past 5 years. His methods might be harsh, but they got results. That's what everyone said, anyway. The trophy case in the school's main hallway was proof enough for the administration to look the other way. Ryan checked his weight for the 3rd time that morning. He needed to drop another 2 pounds before the weekend's tournament, or Coach would make him run until he collapsed again. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch. The dizziness was becoming familiar now, almost like a constant companion during his morning workouts. The heavy gym doors creaked open, and Ryan's heart rate spiked. Coach Barrett's footsteps echoed through the empty space, each step making Ryan's anxiety climb higher. But something was different this morning. There was another set of footsteps, lighter, purposeful. Ryan turned to see a man he didn't recognize walking alongside the coach. The stranger wore a simple black tracksuit, his muscular build evident even in the casual attire. "Matthews?" Coach Barrett's voice boomed across the gym. "Front and center." Ryan jogged over, trying to ignore the black spots dancing in his vision. The coach gestured to the stranger. "This is Mr. Statham. He's in town filming some movie, decided to check out our wrestling program. Show him your stuff. Let's start with 50 sprawls." Ryan's heart sank. Sprawls were Coach Barrett's favorite punishment exercise, a brutal combination of a push-up and explosive movement that left even the fittest athletes gasping for air. 50 of them on an empty stomach and dehydrated body felt impossible. But he knew better than to protest. As Ryan began the exercise, he could feel Jason Statham's eyes on him. The action star stood quietly, his expression unreadable. By the 20th sprawl, Ryan's vision was tunneling. By 30, his arms were shaking uncontrollably. "Pick up the pace, Matthews." Coach Barrett's voice cut through the gym. "You want to embarrass me in front of our guest?" Ryan tried to push harder, but his body was betraying him. The floor seemed to tilt beneath him, and suddenly he was falling. He braced for impact, but strong hands caught him before he hit the mat. Through the haze, he heard a gravelly British accent. "That's enough." The world slowly came back into focus. Jason Statham was supporting his weight, helping him to a sitting position. A water bottle appeared in front of him. "Drink," Jason commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ryan took small sips, aware of Coach Barrett's growing anger. "He's fine," the coach snapped. "Just being dramatic. Matthews, get back up. We're not done here." But Jason didn't move, his hand steady on Ryan's shoulder. "Actually," the action star said quietly, "we are done here." There was something in his voice, a sort of controlled danger that made even Coach Barrett take a step back. Jason helped Ryan to his feet, keeping a supportive hand nearby as the teenager swayed slightly. "How long has he been cutting weight?" Jason asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Coach Barrett's face reddened. "That's none of your business. This is my program and—" "I asked the kid a question," Jason interrupted, his attention fully on Ryan. There was something in his eyes, not pity, but understanding, recognition. Ryan found himself speaking before he could stop himself. 3 weeks, he admitted quietly. Coach says I need to drop 2 weight classes for the tournament. Jason's jaw tightened. And when was the last time you ate? Ryan hesitated, glancing at Coach Barrett, who was practically vibrating with rage. Yesterday, lunch, he finally answered. The action star nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd suspected. Right then, Jason said, his voice deceptively calm. Ryan, grab your things. You're coming with me to get some breakfast. Coach Barrett stepped forward, his face purple with anger. Now listen here, you can't just. Jason turned to face the coach, and something in his expression made the larger man stop mid-sentence. No, you listen, Jason said quietly. I started in martial arts when I was 7. Spent years competing. I've seen coaches like you before, bullies who mistake cruelty for discipline, who break kids down because they're too weak to build them up properly. The gym fell silent, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Jason continued, his voice still eerily calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. I'm going to take this young man to get some food. Then we're going to have a proper chat about what's been happening in this gym. And after that, I'm going to make some calls to the school board, to the Wrestling Federation, and to a few journalist friends of mine who would be very interested in this story. Coach Barrett's face went from purple to pale in seconds. You can't prove anything, he blustered, but his voice had lost its authority. Jason smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Actually, I can. Been filming a bit this morning, got here early, you see. Caught some interesting footage on my phone. The same phone that's still recording right now. Ryan stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe as he watched his coach, the man who had terrorized him and countless others for years, seemed to physically shrink before his eyes. Jason turned back to him, his expression softening. Ready to go, mate? As Ryan gathered his things, his hands trembling slightly, he could feel the world shifting around him. For 2 years, he had lived in fear of Coach Barrett, had accepted the abuse as the price of success, had convinced himself that this was just how things were done. But now, watching Jason Statham stand calmly between him and his tormentor, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. They walked out of the gym together, leaving Coach Barrett sputtering threats that sounded hollow in the morning air. As they reached Jason's car, a sleek black vehicle that would normally have made Ryan nervous about getting his sweaty gym clothes on the leather seats, the action star turned to him with a serious expression. What you've been through, Jason said quietly, it's not right. It's not how coaching should be. It's not how the sport should be. He paused, making sure Ryan was really hearing him. And it's not your fault. Those 4 words hit Ryan harder than any of Coach Barrett's punishments ever had. He felt tears welling up in his eyes and tried to blink them away, embarrassed to be crying in front of Jason Statham of all people. But Jason just squeezed his shoulder gently. Let it out, mate. You've been strong for long enough. And there, in the empty school parking lot as the sun finally began to rise, Ryan Matthews allowed himself to break down. All the fear, all the pain, all the uncertainty of the past 2 years came pouring out. What he didn't know yet was that this moment, this chance encounter with an action star who refused to look the other way, would change not just his life, but the lives of countless other young athletes. What had started as another morning of fear and punishment was about to become the first day of a new chapter, one where courage and kindness would triumph over intimidation and abuse. As Jason's car pulled out of the parking lot, Ryan caught a glimpse of Coach Barrett watching from the gym door, his usual imposing figure somehow diminished in the morning light. For the first time in 2 years, Ryan didn't feel fear at the sight of him. Instead, he felt something else, the quiet certainty that things were finally going to change. The local diner was nearly empty when Jason Statham and Ryan walked in, save for a few early morning regulars nursing their coffee. The smell of bacon and pancakes made Ryan's stomach growl audibly, reminding him just how long it had been since he'd eaten a proper meal. The action star guided him to a quiet booth in the corner, positioning himself so he could see both the door and Ryan clearly. Order whatever you want, Jason said, his voice gentle but firm. But take it slow. Small bites. Ryan nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the menu. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been allowed to eat freely, without calculating every calorie and gram of protein. For months, Food had been the enemy, something to be feared and controlled. The waitress approached, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized Jason, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Ryan ordered scrambled eggs and toast, still hesitant to indulge despite Jason's encouragement. The action star added a side of fruit and a protein shake to the order, then turned his full attention to Ryan. "How long has this been going on?" Jason asked quietly. "The extreme weight cuts, the punishment drills, all of it?" Ryan stared at his hands, folded on the table. Since Coach Barrett took over the program, he finally admitted. At first, it didn't seem so bad. He was getting results. We were winning. Everyone said that's just how champions are made. Jason's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "That's not how champions are made, mate. That's how you break people." He paused as the waitress brought their drinks. "I've seen it before. Coaches who use fear instead of guidance, who mistake cruelty for discipline. They might get short-term results, but they leave lasting damage." As Ryan sipped his water, Jason pulled out his phone and showed him the video he'd recorded that morning. The footage was clear and damning: Coach Barrett's verbal abuse, the dangerous training demands, Ryan's near collapse. "This ends today," Jason said firmly. "But I need to know how many others have gone through this." Ryan's hands clenched around his water glass. "Most of the team," he said softly. "Some quit. Others just endure it. There's this freshman, Tommy. Coach makes him cry almost every practice, but his parents think it's building character." The words came easier now, like a dam breaking. He told Jason about the extreme weight cuts, the deliberate humiliation, the way Coach Barrett would pit teammates against each other. Their food arrived, and Jason watched carefully as Ryan took his first few bites. "Slow down," he reminded gently. "We've got time." As they ate, Jason shared stories from his own martial arts background about the difference between tough training and abuse, between discipline and cruelty. He talked about coaches who had shaped his life positively, who had taught him the true meaning of strength. Real strength, Jason explained, isn't about breaking people down. It's about building them up, helping them discover what they're capable of. He studied Ryan's face carefully. "You're a fighter, Ryan. Not just in wrestling. I can see it in how you've handled all this. But you shouldn't have to fight alone anymore." After breakfast, Jason drove Ryan home, where they found his mother, Sarah Matthews, already waiting anxiously. The school had called her about Ryan's absence, and she'd been worried sick. When she opened the door to find her son with Jason Statham, her expression shifted from concern to confusion. Jason explained everything, showing her the video footage and gently describing what he'd witnessed. Sarah's face went through a range of emotions: shock, horror, guilt, and finally, anger. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered, pulling Ryan into a tight hug. "You stopped talking about wrestling, stopped eating dinner with me. But I never imagined." "It's not your fault, Mrs. Matthews," Jason assured her. "Abusers like Barrett are good at hiding their behavior, at making it seem normal. But it stops today." He outlined his plan: going to the school board, contacting the Wrestling Federation, involving the media if necessary. "But first," he added, "Ryan needs to see a doctor. Those weight cuts aren't healthy, and we need to document everything." While Ryan went to shower and change, Jason and Sarah talked in the kitchen. The action star shared resources for sports psychologists who specialized in athletic trauma, legal contacts who could help navigate the complaints process, and his own personal number. "I'm not just going to walk away from this," he promised. "I've seen too many kids broken by coaches like Barrett. It's time someone stood up." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Jason's presence opened doors that might have otherwise remained closed. The local medical center saw Ryan immediately, documenting his condition and the effects of the extreme weight cutting. The doctor's report was damning. Ryan was severely dehydrated, showing signs of malnutrition, and had stress fractures that had been left untreated. While Ryan was being examined, Jason made calls. His agent connected him with a sports journalist who had been investigating similar cases of coaching abuse. His lawyer reached out to the State Wrestling Federation. And most importantly, he contacted other parents from the team, creating a secure group chat where they could share their experiences and evidence. By afternoon, The story was beginning to break. Other students started coming forward, sharing their own experiences with Coach Barrett. The pattern was clear and consistent: emotional abuse, dangerous weight-cutting demands, excessive punishment drills, and a culture of fear that had silenced any complaints. Tommy, the freshman Ryan had mentioned, arrived at the medical center with his parents. The boy was terrified of speaking out, but seeing Ryan with Jason gave him courage. His parents, who had dismissed his earlier complaints as normal athletic discipline, were horrified when they saw the video and heard the similar stories from other families. The school administration tried to contain the situation, releasing a statement about investigating the allegations, but Jason wasn't having it. He gave a brief interview to the local news, standing outside the medical center with Ryan and other team members. "This isn't about one coach or one team," he told the reporters. "This is about protecting young athletes from abuse disguised as training. It's about standing up and saying enough is enough." Back at Ryan's house that evening, a group of wrestlers and their parents gathered in the living room. Jason had brought in a sports psychologist who specialized in athletic trauma, and together they created a safe space for the athletes to share their experiences. The stories poured out: years of abuse, of fear, of believing that this was what it took to be a champion. Ryan, who had spent so long feeling isolated in his suffering, found himself surrounded by teammates who understood exactly what he'd been through. They shared their stories, their fears, and their relief at finally being heard. The sports psychologist helped them understand that what they'd experienced wasn't normal training, wasn't character building, but was genuine abuse. Jason stayed through it all, his presence a steady reminder that they weren't alone anymore. He shared more of his own experiences in martial arts and film stunts, emphasizing the difference between challenging training and abuse. "A good coach," he explained, "pushes you to be better while keeping you safe. They build your confidence, not tear it down. They celebrate your successes instead of using them to manipulate you." As the evening wore on, the group began to plan their next steps. Jason's lawyer had outlined the legal process for filing formal complaints, while the sports journalist worked with the families to document their experiences. The State Wrestling Federation had already suspended Coach Barrett pending investigation, and other schools were beginning to examine their own athletic programs more closely. For Ryan, the most powerful moment came when Tommy's father approached him, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," the man said quietly. "If you hadn't spoken up, if Mr. Statham hadn't stepped in, my son might have suffered for years. You showed real courage today." Jason overheard the exchange and placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "That's what real strength looks like," he said. "Not being able to endure abuse, but having the courage to stand up and say no more. To protect not just yourself, but others." Ryan felt something shift inside him, the weight of fear and shame being replaced by a new kind of strength. As the families began to leave, Jason pulled Ryan aside for a private word. "I meant what I said this morning. This ends today. But the healing, that's just beginning. You've got support now, proper support. Use it. And remember, you're not just a survivor of abuse, you're the one who helped stop it." Sarah Matthews hugged Jason goodbye, struggling to find words to express her gratitude. The action star simply smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "being in the right place at the right time is all it takes to make a difference." Ryan did the hard part. He was brave enough to tell the truth when someone finally asked the right questions. As Jason's car pulled away from the Matthews house, Ryan stood in the doorway, feeling both exhausted and somehow lighter than he had in years. The future was uncertain. There would be investigations, probably legal proceedings, and definitely changes to the wrestling program. But for the first time in 2 years, he wasn't facing it alone. The story of what happened at Riverside High's wrestling program was just beginning to spread, but already it was sparking conversations in athletic programs across the country. Sometimes it takes one person willing to speak up, one moment of intervention, to start a chain reaction that can change countless lives. For Ryan Matthews and his teammates, that moment came when Jason Statham walked into their gym and refused to look the other way. The news broke nationwide the next morning. Major sports networks picked up the story, running the headline, "Action Star Exposes Systematic Abuse in High School Wrestling Program." The video Jason had recorded went viral, sparking intense discussions about coaching ethics and athlete safety. But more importantly, it gave other young athletes the courage to speak up about their own experiences. Coach Barrett had attempted to defend himself, giving an interview where he claimed his methods were simply old-school coaching and that he was building character. But his words rang hollow against the mounting evidence. More videos emerged from team practices, secretly recorded by worried students. Former wrestlers came forward with their stories, some dating back to Barrett's early coaching days at other schools. Jason Statham hadn't returned to his film set. Instead, he'd stayed in town, working with Ryan and the other wrestlers to ensure their stories were heard and properly documented. He'd brought in Dr. Sarah Chin, a renowned sports psychologist specializing in athletic trauma, to work with the team. The action star covered all the medical and psychological evaluation costs for every affected athlete. 3 days after the initial confrontation, the school board called an emergency meeting. The gymnasium was packed with parents, students, and media. Ryan sat in the front row between his mother and Jason, his heart pounding as he prepared to speak publicly about his experiences for the first time. "My name is Ryan Matthews," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "For 2 years, I believed that being abused meant I was becoming stronger. Coach Barrett convinced us that his methods were making us champions, that the pain and fear were necessary sacrifices for success. But true strength isn't about enduring abuse, it's about having the courage to stand up against it." One by one, other wrestlers took the podium. Tommy, the freshman, spoke about being forced to wrestle while injured. Another student described passing out from dehydration during weight cuts. A former team captain, now in college, detailed how the abuse had nearly driven him to suicide. Their testimonies painted a picture of systematic abuse masked as tough coaching. The school board's decision was unanimous. Coach Barrett was immediately terminated, and a full investigation was launched into how his behavior had gone unchecked for so long. Several administrators who had ignored complaints were placed on administrative leave. But the most significant change came in the form of new athletic oversight policies. Jason had brought in Mark Johnson, a former Olympic wrestler known for his ethical coaching methods, to consult on rebuilding the program. Together with Dr. Chen, they developed a comprehensive plan that would transform not just Riverside High's wrestling program, but potentially serve as a model for other schools. "Athletic excellence and athlete welfare aren't opposing forces," Mark explained to the board. "The best performances come from athletes who are physically and mentally healthy, who trust their coaches, and who feel safe in their training environment." He outlined new protocols for weight management, injury prevention, and mental health support. The State Wrestling Federation took notice. Within a week, they had adopted many of the proposed guidelines, requiring all member schools to implement similar safeguards. Other states began following suit, using the Riverside case as a catalyst for change in their own athletic programs. But the most profound changes were happening within the wrestlers themselves. Under Dr. Chen's guidance, they began to heal, not just individually but as a team. The toxic competition that Coach Barrett had fostered was replaced by genuine camaraderie. Athletes who had been pitted against each other now supported one another's recovery. Ryan found himself becoming a leader in this transformation. His willingness to speak up had inspired others, and now younger wrestlers looked to him for guidance. Jason noticed this change in Ryan, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence instead of fear. "You've found your real strength," Jason told him during one of their now regular conversations. "Not the kind Barrett tried to force on you, but something much more powerful, the strength to stand up for others, to help them heal." The story caught the attention of national athletic organizations. The Olympic Committee launched an investigation into coaching practices across multiple sports. Stories similar to Ryan's began emerging from gymnastics, swimming, and other competitive programs. A movement was building, one that demanded accountability and reform in youth sports. Jason used his platform to amplify these voices. He gave interviews about the importance of protecting young athletes, sharing his own experiences with both good and bad coaching in martial arts. His production company announced plans for a documentary series exploring the culture of abuse in youth sports and highlighting positive alternatives. 6 weeks after that fateful morning in the gym, Riverside High's wrestling program reopened under new leadership. Mark Johnson had agreed to take over as head coach, bringing with him a philosophy that emphasized both athletic excellence and athlete well-being. The team's first practice under his guidance was a stark contrast to what they had known before. "Wrestling should challenge you," Mark told the assembled athletes, "but it should also empower you. You're here to become not just better wrestlers, but better people. That means training smart, respecting your bodies, and supporting each other." Ryan felt tears in his eyes as he looked around at his teammates. Some were returning athletes who had survived Barrett's abuse. Others were new faces, drawn to the program by its commitment to reform. All of them shared a sense of hope and determination that had been missing under the old regime. The changes weren't just philosophical. New safety protocols were in place, including regular health checks and proper weight management guidance. A nutritionist worked with each athlete to develop healthy eating plans. Mental health support was readily available, with Dr. Chen maintaining regular office hours at the school. Most importantly, there was a new atmosphere of open communication. Athletes were encouraged to speak up about concerns, to question training methods they didn't understand, and to support each other's growth. The fear that had once permeated the gym was replaced by a spirit of collaborative improvement. Jason continued to be involved, making regular visits to check on the team's progress. He worked with Mark to develop a mentorship program, bringing in successful wrestlers who exemplified positive leadership to speak with the team. These role models shared not just their athletic knowledge, but their experiences with maintaining mental and emotional health in competitive sports. One morning, exactly 2 months after Jason's intervention, Ryan arrived at practice to find a film crew setting up in the gym. The documentary team was there to capture the program's transformation, but they were also there to record a special announcement. Jason gathered the team together, his expression serious but proud. "What happened here was terrible," he began, "but your response to it has been inspiring. You've shown incredible courage in speaking up, in supporting each other, and in helping to create change that will protect other athletes. That's why I want to announce the establishment of the Safe Sport Initiative." The initiative, funded by Jason's production company and supported by various sports organizations, would provide resources for athletic programs nationwide to implement similar reforms. It included funding for mental health support, training for coaches in positive leadership methods, and a reporting system for athletes who experienced abuse. "But that's not all," Jason continued, turning to Ryan. "We want you to be part of this, mate. Your story, your courage in speaking up, that's what started all of this. How would you feel about joining us as a youth ambassador for the program?" Ryan was stunned. He looked around at his teammates, his coach, his mother standing at the back of the gym with tears in her eyes. 2 months ago, he had been trapped in a cycle of abuse, believing he had no voice and no choice. Now he was being offered a chance to help ensure no other young athlete would have to endure what he had. "I want to help," he said firmly. "I want to make sure other kids know they don't have to suffer in silence, that there are people who will listen and help." Jason smiled, squeezing his shoulder in that now familiar gesture of support. The documentary crew captured practice that day, filming as Mark led the team through drills that emphasized technique, safety, and mutual support. They interviewed athletes about the changes in the program, about their healing process, about their hopes for the future of the sport. But perhaps the most powerful moment came during a water break, when Tommy, the once terrified freshman, approached Ryan. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to hate coming to practice. I used to wish I could quit. But now I actually look forward to it. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up." Ryan glanced over at Jason, who was watching the exchange with a knowing smile. The action star had taught him that real heroes weren't just the ones who could fight the bad guys in movies, they were the ones who had the courage to stand up for what was right, to protect others, to create positive change. The transformation of Riverside High's wrestling program was becoming a blueprint for athletic reform across the country. But more importantly, it was proof that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always hope for change. All it took was one person willing to speak up, and another willing to listen and take action. 1 year after Jason Statham walked into Riverside High's gymnasium, The wrestling program had become a model of athletic excellence and ethical coaching. The morning sun streamed through the windows as Ryan Matthews led a group of younger wrestlers through warm-up exercises. Now a senior and team captain, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with intimidation or fear. The Safe Sport initiative, launched by Jason in the wake of the Coach Barrett scandal, had spread to over 500 schools across the country. The documentary about Riverside High's transformation had won several awards and, more importantly, had sparked a national conversation about coaching ethics and athlete safety. But the real success stories were in the individual lives that had been changed. Coach Mark Johnson watched from the side of the mat as Ryan demonstrated a technique, noting how the young captain took time to explain not just the move, but also its proper execution to prevent injury. The program's new philosophy of safety first, excellence always had proven remarkably successful. The team had just won their district championship, not through fear and extreme weight cutting, but through proper training, technique, and teamwork. Jason Statham had kept his promise to stay involved. Even with his busy filming schedule, he made regular video calls to check on the team's progress and visited whenever he was in the area. His production company had set up a scholarship fund for athletes who demonstrated leadership in promoting positive sports culture, with Ryan being named its first recipient. The morning's practice was special. Jason was visiting to film a follow-up segment for the documentary. As he walked into the gym, several of the younger wrestlers whispered excitedly, but their all was different now. They didn't just see him as an action star, they saw him as the person who had helped transform their sport. "Looking good, mate," Jason said, greeting Ryan with a warm handshake that turned into a hug. The action star surveyed the gym, taking in the new safety protocols posted on the walls, the proper weight management guidelines, and the emergency contact numbers that included mental health resources. "Quite different from a year ago, isn't it?" Ryan nodded, remembering that morning when everything had changed. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," he admitted. "Not just how different the program is, but how different I feel. I'm not afraid anymore." Jason squeezed his shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar over the past year. That's what real strength looks like. The documentary crew set up their equipment as the team continued their practice. They captured footage of the new training methods, the supportive atmosphere, and the visible camaraderie among the wrestlers. But the most powerful moments came during the interviews with the athletes themselves. Tommy, no longer the scared freshman but now a confident sophomore, spoke about the difference in his experience. "Last year, I used to throw up before practice from anxiety. Now, I look forward to coming here. It's still challenging, but it's the right kind of challenge. We push ourselves because we want to improve, not because we're afraid." Other wrestlers shared similar stories of transformation. Many had initially been skeptical of the new approach, conditioned to believe that extreme methods were necessary for success. But the team's recent victories had proven that ethical coaching could produce champions, both in sport and in character. The cameras followed Ryan as he led a peer support session, something that had become a regular part of the program. Athletes discussed their challenges, their goals, and any concerns they had. It was a stark contrast to the culture of silence that had existed under Coach Barrett. "The biggest lesson I've learned," Ryan told the camera, "is that speaking up about abuse isn't just about stopping something bad, it's about making room for something good to take its place. We're not just better wrestlers now, we're better people. We look out for each other." Jason sat in on the session, sharing stories from his own athletic journey and the importance of mental health in sports. "Physical toughness is part of athletics," he explained, "but mental well-being is just as crucial. You can't perform your best when you're living in fear." The afternoon brought a special ceremony in the school auditorium. The Safe Sport initiative was recognizing Riverside High's wrestling program as a national model, and several other schools were sending representatives to learn from their experience. But the most surprising guest was someone no one had expected to see again. Marcus Sterling, Coach Barrett's former assistant who had often enabled his abuse, had asked to speak. He had spent the past year working with sports psychologists and ethics counselors, trying to understand and make amends for his role in the toxic culture. With Jason's approval, he was given the opportunity to address the team. "I was wrong," Sterling began, his voice thick with emotion. I saw what was happening and did nothing. Worse, I convinced myself it was normal, that it was necessary for success. Watching this program transform, seeing what real coaching looks like, has shown me how wrong I was. I can't undo the past, but I can help prevent it from happening elsewhere. Sterling had become an advocate for coaching reform, working with the Safe Sport Initiative to help identify and address toxic practices in athletic programs. His insider perspective, combined with genuine remorse and a commitment to change, made him a powerful voice in the movement. The ceremony also included the announcement of the first group of Safe Sport Initiative scholarships. 10 athletes from across the country, including Ryan, would receive full college scholarships in recognition of their leadership in promoting positive sports culture. But the announcement came with the responsibility each recipient would serve as a mentor to other athletes facing similar challenges. As Ryan accepted his scholarship, he shared a story he had never told publicly before. The morning Mr. Statham came to our gym, I had been thinking about quitting. Not just wrestling, everything. The abuse had broken something in me, made me believe I was worthless. But one person willing to stand up, to say, "This isn't right," changed everything. It showed me that I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to accept abuse as the price of success. The impact of his words was visible in the audience. Parents wiped away tears, coaches nodded in recognition, and athletes sat up straighter, many seeing their own experiences reflected in Ryan's story. Jason, watching from the side of the stage, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. What had started as a chance encounter had grown into a movement that was changing lives. After the ceremony, the team gathered for a special practice session. Jason joined them on the mats, not as a celebrity or savior, but as a fellow athlete sharing in their journey. The session focused not just on wrestling techniques, but on the principles that had become the foundation of the program: respect, support, and ethical competition. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the gym, Ryan found himself standing in the same spot where he had nearly collapsed a year ago. But everything else had changed. The air no longer felt heavy with fear, the silence was no longer oppressive. Instead, the gym echoed with encouraging shouts and occasional laughter. "Quite a difference, isn't it?" Jason said, joining him. Ryan nodded, watching as Tommy helped a new wrestler perfect a move, showing the same patience and support that had become the hallmark of their program. "It's like a completely different world. You know what the best part is?" Jason continued. "This isn't just about wrestling anymore. Every kid who comes through this program now learns what real strength looks like. They learn that speaking up against abuse isn't just allowed, it's expected. That supporting others doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger." The documentary crew captured these final moments: the transformed gym, the supportive atmosphere, the visible proof that change was possible. But perhaps the most powerful shot was the simplest: Ryan Matthews, standing tall and confident, helping a younger wrestler up from the mat with a smile and a word of encouragement. The story of Riverside High's wrestling program had become more than just a tale of exposure and reform. It was a testament to the power of intervention, the importance of speaking up, and the truth that real strength comes not from enduring abuse, but from having the courage to stand against it. As practice ended and the wrestlers began to leave, many stopped to thank Jason one more time. But the action star deflected their gratitude. "Thank Ryan," he told them. "He's the one who had the courage to speak up first." Sometimes that's all it takes, one person willing to stand up and say, "No more." The transformation that had begun with a chance encounter in an early morning gym had rippled out far beyond Riverside High. Other schools, other sports, other young athletes were finding their voices, standing up against abuse, and discovering what real coaching and true strength looked like. Let us know in the comments if you've ever witnessed someone standing up against abuse in sports or any other field. Share this video to spread awareness that no one should have to endure abuse in the name of success or achievement. Together, we can create a safer, more supportive environment for all athletes. Remember, true strength isn't about enduring abuse, it's about having the courage to speak up and make a difference. Just like Ryan Matthews and Jason Statham showed us, sometimes all it takes is one person willing to take a stand to create lasting change.